Today we're talking about something pretty incredible, a procedure that literally uses a vitamin and a special kind of light to strengthen the front part of the human eye. So how on earth does that actually work? Let's dive in. So let's just start with that big question right there. How do you strengthen the living tissue of the human eye, especially once it starts to get weaker? I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But the answer is actually, well, surprisingly elegant. Believe it or not, it all boils down to two main ingredients: a vitamin, specifically a form of vitamin B2, and a very precise kind of ultraviolet light. You put those two together and they kick off a reaction that reinforces the cornea from the inside. Okay, but before we get into the fix, we really have to understand the problem itself. Why would the cornea, the eye's clear front shield, start to lose its strength and shape in the first place? A healthy cornea, you can think of it like a perfectly woven, super strong piece of fabric. It's made of collagen fibers and proteins, all arranged in this incredibly precise, stable structure. That structure is what gives it its perfect curve and its strength. But in conditions like keratoconus, that fabric, it starts to fail. The links between the collagen fibers get weak, the whole tissue gets thinner, and the cornea starts to bulge out into a cone shape. And that bulge is what messes up your vision so badly. So the name of the game is stopping that from getting any worse. And that is where this amazing solution comes into play. It's a procedure designed specifically to put the brakes on that weakening process and basically refortify the cornea structure. It's called corneal cross-linking, or just CXL for short. So what is it really? Well, at its heart, CXL is all about making the cornea stiffer and more rigid. The whole point is to create new chemical bonds, new crosslinks, between the collagen fibers that are already there. It's like reweaving that fabric to make it strong again. So how does it forge these new bonds? This is where things get really cool. It's not surgery in the traditional sense. It's actually a controlled photochemical reaction, a chemical reaction that's kicked off by light. The whole thing relies on this power trio. First, you've got Riboflavin, that vitamin B2 we talked about. It acts as a photosensitiser, which is just a fancy way of saying it's the molecule that gets the party started when light hits it. Then you have UVA light, which is the energy source. And finally, you have oxygen, which is already in the cornea, ready to go as the catalyst. So here's how it all comes together. First, the eye is soaked in Riboflavin drops, so it gets into the corneal tissue. Then, a very specific UVA light is aimed at it. The Riboflavin molecules slurp up that light energy and get excited. This makes them react with oxygen, creating these highly reactive molecules that basically act like tiny little welders, forging strong new bonds between all the collagen fibers. It's pretty amazing. And here's the really brilliant part about using Riboflavin. It has two jobs. On one hand, it's the photosensitizer that kicks off the whole strengthening reaction. But on the other hand, it also acts as a built-in safety filter. It absorbs any excess UVA light, protecting the more sensitive parts of the eye deeper inside, like the lens and the retina. It's both the key and the shield. Okay, so that's the science. Pretty cool, right? But how does this all translate into an actual treatment that a doctor performs? Let's take a look at the protocols they use in the real world. So there are a few ways to do it. The original method, called the Dresden protocol, used a pretty low-power UV light for a full 30 minutes. But now there are newer, accelerated protocols that crank up the power so you can get it done in just 10 or even 5 minutes. But look at that last column. No matter which protocol you use, the total amount of energy delivered is always the same. And that number is 5.4 joules per square centimeter. This isn't just a random number. It's the magic number. It's based on a scientific principle that says you can get the same result with low power for a long time or high power for a short time. This is the sweet spot for getting the cornea strong enough while keeping everything as safe as possible. Which brings us to our last section. Let's talk about safety. Because with any procedure, there are really important requirements and potential risks to think about. And then we'll take a quick peek at what the future might hold. When it comes to safety, probably the most important rule is this number: 400 microns. The patient's cornea has to be at least that thick to be a good candidate. Why? Well, it ensures there's enough tissue to absorb all that UVA energy, creating a safe buffer zone to protect the very delicate cells on the back surface of the cornea. Now, CXL is incredibly effective, but you always want a balanced picture, right? There are potential risks, things like infection or some corneal haze that's usually just temporary, or maybe the surface takes a little longer to heal. These are pretty uncommon when the protocols are followed to the letter, but it really shows why picking the right patient and using the right technique is so crucial. And this really gets to the heart of why this treatment is so smart. The UVA light gets absorbed most heavily in the front layers of the cornea. That means the strengthening effect is concentrated right where it needs to be, in the front part of the cornea that's actually bulging out. It reinforces the exact area that's under the most stress. It's incredibly precise. So that leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought. We figured out a way to strengthen the cornea, but where do we go from here? The future is likely all about customization. Imagine using a detailed 3D map of a patient's cornea to apply the strengthening energy only to the specific spots that are the weakest. We'd be moving from a general treatment to a truly personalized fortification of the eye. Pretty amazing stuff to think about.